Okay, so Ben asked me to do a very ad hoc introduction to Patrick and Doug, who I've known both of them for many years, and as Ben as well. What's interesting is I originally met Ben at Doug King's Center in Atlanta. Doug works in the whole area of Christian community that is moving toward a universal view of the Christian message and of Christology, away from the ticket to heaven or the ticket to another world and after we pass away, but that the message of salvation in all of the religions is transformation in the here and now on this planet, and of course in all the other dimensions as well. And that way everybody's dream globally from all the religions comes true. There's a coherence to this prophetic tradition, which they'll be talking about. And Ben had met Doug in international circles and felt that we needed to meet. And so Doug invited Ben and I both to his place, and that was actually what became the birth of everything we did together that became Unity.Earth, everything that's come from all the people who joined us in all of these years. And of course, in New York and in the United States context, we were all familiar with Patrick, because Patrick was one of the people in the Roman Catholic community and the Franciscan community who was walking the talk. He was talking about what does it mean for the prophetic voice and the action in the real world of love and the Christological transformational view of our nature, as one of our commenters, Ben Nancy here, has been saying on and on about, we are not all these bad things that have been said about us. We are wonderful beings with these wonderful potentials. And Patrick, as you'll see in his presentation, has been a champion of the reality of that message. And no accident then that another Franciscan, Pope Francis himself, is now Pope, and also why he gets backlash about that, because we've been in this old paradigm for so long. So these two guys, Ben suggested that I introduce them. So about a month ago, I introduced Patrick and Doug, and of course they hit it off like right away, and they had wonderful discussion. And so we said, heck, let's make a version of this discussion for World Unity Week, and we had them shoot this video. So without me going on any longer, that's kind of where all of this came from, and I'm so glad it happened.
Well, welcome to World Unity Week again. My name is Ben Bowler, Executive Director. Welcome, friends. Back to World Unity Week. It was an amazing presentation from Father Josh Strom Karuthadam, all about the visions for a new earth. And this beautiful day, we're honoring faith as our frequency for today, which is so appropriate. And I'm delighted to be sitting down here with two esteemed elders from the movement globally. I'm here with Doug King and Patrick Carolan. Doug and Patrick, welcome to World Unity Week.
Great.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Great to be here.
Now, for those who may not know, Doug King is the founder and president of Presence TV. And I came across Presence TV when Doug invited me to his home in Atlanta some years ago, back in 2015, I think it was, Doug, when we first had him, where I met Dr. Kurt Johnson for the first time. And there was something on your website which was integral theology. I've never seen those two words together before. I thought, wow, this is going to be an interesting discussion. And boy, it's been an amazing ride ever since. You host a global podcast on global conversations for a new earth. And you do incredible work at Presence of bringing together the work, I guess, of integral theory together with those who may be post-religious or on that process of going universal. And you help steward groups from all right across the spectrum along that journey through your integral theology and through the many different projects and activities that you do. So it's a great honor to have you, Doug King, here with us today, and with Patrick, who I'll give a brief introduction to as well, as we really open up to this idea of, what is this new earth rising? What is it that we are talking about? Where does it come from? What are the prophetic pointers to it through the Judeo-Christian tradition. We know that there are prophecies in all the different traditions, all the indigenous traditions, all the Eastern traditions, all talk about a whole, healed, transformed society. And we definitely have a rich tradition in the Judeo-Christian heritage as well, which we're going to be talking about today and unpacking that a little bit. Patrick, Carolan is a Catholic activist and media communicator and troublemaker in general. And Patrick, it's great to have you with us as well.
Thank you.
So, Doug, let's kick it off. Let's go to you. Integral theology, global conversation for a new earth, all the different things that you've been doing all these years. Tell us what do you see as kind of the most important aspect for us to focus on as we reflect on this new earth rising?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Ben, for asking me to participate with Patrick in this. It's been a real pleasure to get to know Patrick as well, and really appreciate your many years of dedication to the proposal for unity and the amount of work you put into that. So from our end, when I saw the theme, I had to smile because our tagline is a global conversation for a new earth, and this is World Unity Week, a new earth rising. And, when I thought about that, Ben, I thought about the first question that a consultant would ask if he or she were in a spiral dynamics model. And that question is, from what to what? And so the question is, a new earth rising from what to what? And initially, it always starts with a paradigm shift in thinking and consciousness. In other words, until we change our thinking, we're not going to change our actions. And so paradigm activism is always going to lead to new paradigm actions. That's what you have been about ever since. One of the phrases I've liked that's like definitely the 30,000 foot view of this whole thing is Ken Wilber's integral trajectory, where he describes humanity moving from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric. And ethnocentric is very much instinctual within us, just like our archaic survival level is very much instinctual. If something were to happen to anybody in our families, our Zoom would end right now. We would be off to see what that emergency was. That's because the ethnocentric is very much an instinctual thing inside of us. And we react quickly. However, this new earth rising to me is challenging because now I'm thinking about how do I take that love of family and that ethnocentric that's already there naturally, and how do I move it to all others on the planet? And so world-centric is a challenge for me to respond using my self-reflective abilities to think before I react. So I'm responding versus reacting. And so that's helping this new earth rise. So world-centric thinking to me, we would go then to source. My wife gave me an Ancestry.com kit for Christmas, and I was tracing my ancestry, which again goes back to the ethnocentric. But there's this thing inside of us that's always looking for, what is our source? Where did we come from? What was our biological ancestry like, and that kind of thing. Well, source is that which defines identity, whereas diversity, the tremendous diversity on the planet, is role and function. So we all celebrate our ancestry. We all celebrate the diversity of all the genders and races and ethnicities and nationalities and so forth. But we realize that celebration is a celebration that plays a role and function. But our identity is, to me, guys, that which transcends those diverse roles and functions. So when we're talking about identity, we're talking about source. And it is there that we can find unity in this creative new earth, is that I don't attach to some particularism that creates inside of me an other, that I see, oh, that's another, and I've got boundaries within that. So the new earth is this travel beyond that boundary-driven thinking. And yes, we use spiral dynamics quite a bit because it shows through history, as the three of us talked about briefly before we came on here, it through history in the Judeo-Christian, how God was seen in the earlier times. As you brought up, Ben, you go from judge to monarch, and you're bringing about a bigger world, if you will, when you move from the tribe to the empire. But even now, what we're saying is, let's transcend all the way to matters of the heart, to matters that are universal and values that are universal to all of us, even to those that might even declare themselves to be atheists. We do share a universal thinking in terms of associated values. So for me, this earth rising is a process that's been going on for a long time. All of us are more aware today than ever of that process. And what's really cool is we're all here on this call, as well as many other calls, trying to encourage, as many people as possible to be thinking in these terms. So I'll leave it there for right now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Doug. Fascinating kind of framing there and kicking it off in getting to the essence of identity and who we are in terms of what's our relationship to the original source. These are really the key critical questions to open us up. Patrick, as a Franciscan, we've had many great conversations over the years about, what was the mission of St. Francis and how does it relate to, the journey that we're on today, and some of your own ideas about how do we, as Doug's saying, how do we go from where we are towards where we are called?
So thank you, Ben, for that question. And thank you, Doug, for that wonderful presentation. I think, whenever I talk from the lens of a Christian, because I still consider myself Christian. I'm Franciscan and I'm Christian. But I think, Teilhard de Chardin said, we either evolve or we'll be annihilated. And I don't believe Teilhard was talking about a physical evolution. I think what Teilhard was talking about was a spiritual evolution. And we sort of lost sight of the spiritual evolution. We sort of consider ourselves to be really woke people because we believe in evolution from a scientific perspective. We totally forget about the spiritual side of evolution. And in fact, evolution is our spiritual story. So we have to really think about that. And how is our spiritual stories evolving? How are they changing? Father Josh, I thought, in his presentation, put it really well when he talked about the incarnation. The incarnation is this essential theme of Christianity. The idea that Jesus came because we committed sin, and then Jesus had to die on the cross to save us from sin. That our whole theology is centered around that, so that then we're here so we can get there. Our whole purpose here is to get to there. There's a 13th century Franciscan theologian and philosopher, John Duns Scotus, brilliant. I think one of the most brilliant philosophers of all time. And he wrote that the incarnation of the Son of God is the very reason for the whole creation. To think that God would have given us such a task had Adam not sinned would be quite unreasonable. I say, therefore, that the fall was not the cause of Christ's predestination, and that if no one had fallen, neither angel nor man, in this same hypothesis, Christ would still have been predestined in the same way. So if Duns Scotus is right, and original sin had nothing to do with the incarnation, then we have to ask ourselves the question, what was the purpose of the incarnation? God, according to Scotus and according to the Franciscans, the moment God conceived creation, God knew that the incarnation was going to happen. And in Franciscan theology, and not just Franciscan, but a lot of theology that's out there, the incarnation was about God becoming one with us, and we becoming one with God, being co-creators in creating, not going to heaven, but in creating heaven here on earth. We often, in Christian language, we often use the expression, and I know, Doug, you've probably used this a lot in the evangelical world, we have to get back to the Garden of Eden. I actually think that what we have to do is create the Garden of Eden, that we started that process and we sort of got waylaid along the way. And we thought the Garden of Eden was someplace else. We're here to create the Garden of Eden here, now, at this point in time. And so we have to ask ourselves that question. How does that happen? What do we need to do? What do we need to change in order to create that heaven? I wrote an article recently, and I started it out by saying, suppose you woke up this morning, you opened your email, and it was an email from God. And your first response would be, this is probably spam, but your curiosity got the best of it, so you opened it. And in the article, God said, I decided to get serious about creating heaven on earth. I need your help. Tell me what you will do. What's the first step you're going to take to create this heaven on earth? How would you answer that email? So we have to think about what that means. You know, God in Christianity, the prayer we pray the most is the Lord's Prayer. And in it says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what makes us think that in heaven, there'll be children living in garbage dumps, or we'll be destroying the environment? If that's not acceptable in heaven, why would we not think that? Why would we think God would find that acceptable on earth? We have to really reimagine our spirituality to be one, as Doug described it, oneness with not just with God, but with all of creation. And I'll just end with this two little things. One is, I think that we kind of have gotten it all wrong, that we believe that we first have to be in right relationship with God. And we spend all of our time trying to be in right relationship with God, and we do that in various religions. We go to churches, we pray, we hold our hands the right way, and we hope that that's going to get us in right relationship with God. And then when we're in right relationship with God, we can worry about the rest of creation. When in reality, I think we're supposed to be in right relationship with all of creation. And when we are in right relationship with all of creation, we will be then in right relationship with God. So we have to sort of rethink what we're doing. And I'll leave us this part of it with this quote, this piece that my good friend, Sister Ilia Delio, wrote in her article, The Death of God, the Rebirth of God. And what she writes, it's about the new old story that Jesus taught us. She writes, Jesus' integral consciousness of wholeness evoked a genuine revolution in cosmic and social relations, a new creativity, a new structure of existence based on community and shared value. He saw all human beings, and indeed all creation, as part of himself, and called his disciples to a new future to create a transformed earth where all could live together in justice, mercy, and peace. So we have to move away, we have to evolve away from that whole concept of we are here so we can get to there. We are here so we can create heaven here. So this can be heaven. And I'll leave it on that note.
Beautiful stuff, Patrick. Very, very evocative and thought-provoking. This idea of partnership with the divine in order to co-create heaven on earth, new heavens, new earth. I mean, all the different beautiful, poetic, evocative phrases that are in the tradition and which have been updated all the time and reimagined all the time. We were talking a little bit before. I had the great privilege of talking to Rabbi David Rosen from Israel and asked him to, go back to that quote of Isaiah, because here's the thing about a new earth. A lot of people will probably think it's just a book by Eckhart Tolle, in some communities, but it does go back all the way through, as referenced multiple times in the New Testament by Peter the Apostle. He didn't write a lot, Peter, but what he did write, he did reference new heavens and a new earth. And of course, famously in the book of Revelations, it's such a central image of the new heavens and a new earth is a critical moment in the book of Revelations, but its provenance, its origin, goes all the way back to the prophet Isaiah. And, there's so much in the prophet Isaiah that's really seen that is seen as, in a sense, a universal prophet for all humanity, not just belonging to the Judaic tradition or the Judeo-Christian tradition. There's so much back in those prophecies. We spend a lot of time in Unity Earth, and rightly so, honoring and listening to indigenous prophecies coming from the North Americas or from South America, from Asia, from Africa, from Australia, different parts of the world. And indigenous prophecies are very powerful because they're telling a story of what is and what is becoming. And same with Isaiah. Isaiah is one of the universal prophets. So when David rose and went back to, and we have it in the English, Christian Bible as Isaiah 65, 17 to 25, where new heaven and a new earth is first referenced. But he went back to most of the English translations say something like, "Behold, I will create new heavens and a new earth." It's Isaiah writing as the voice of the divine, of God. But David rose and said, actually, the tense isn't even correct. It's not "I will." It's not sometime in the future. The correct translation is "I am." And so that we have then this present moment of the unfolding now. And the other thing, which I think, and you just spoke to so beautifully, Patrick, is that, it's not a sense that there's a divine being who's doing everything and we're just kind of along for the ride. Embedded in the deepest covenant of Jewish religious tradition is the relationship between God and man. Now, it comes out as tikkun olam. It comes out in so many different ways, but it is a co-creative partnership. It's a coming together in unity of our will becoming thy will and coming to make this heaven on earth. When our will becomes the will of God, then that is the beginning of heaven on earth. So our volition, our creative agency is central. And we can debate about free will or not free will, but we have a choice, and we have this power of this choice. And so embedded in that Isaiah, that original reference, Doug, is that, we create new heavens and a new earth. It's an unfolding now. And the more we get to understand the wisdom of indigenous people, the more we realize that this is how the ancient ones see the world, not as sort of a before and a now and a future, but as an integrated whole in this creative moment. And David Bohm, with his implicate order and explicate order, and the whole movement itself is this unfolding process of eternity now. And so embedded in all of that, there seems to be a great opportunity, Doug, for us to share this message to a broad and a wide community of, 84% of the world still affiliates with a religion. So it's really important we find ways to communicate and bring people along with this. But I guess the question, Doug, for you is, what's your sense of how we can move more into this cosmology of understanding the unfolding creative process that we're in, and how can we communicate it, and how can we best bring others from where they are together, meeting them where they are, and also build a bigger unity and a bigger, more effective global organism that can execute this creation of heaven on earth, this creation of a new heaven and a new earth?
Great question. Very great question. It's a difficult question because in one sense, evolution is driven by people encountering what spiral dynamics calls the unworkable. And so it is when I encounter something in my life that's not working anymore, once I've hit my head against the wall enough times, I may eventually say, maybe I need to try something different. So when I'm talking to people within, especially Christianity, and I talk to a lot of pastors that are trying to bring evolution without causing problems within their specific denominational group. And so if you look at the worldviews that we're facing right now, primarily right here in the West, I'll say that's my primary and Patrick's primary place. You have traditional worldview, modern, and postmodern. They all three exist very much and alive today. When I encounter somebody that's in a traditional worldview, they're typically going to be called fundamentalist or orthodox by people who just have a general knowledge of denominations and religions. Someone who's what you would consider to be a fundamentalist. And in that sense, Ben, my wife and I, Danae, who sometimes our joke is the best thing you can do there is do not engage. because what happens there is it can descend quickly into arguments and debating and non-constructive use of your time.
Mhm.
Now, when you move into modernity, that's when you get into hashtag deconstruction, hashtag deconstructing faith, hashtag deconstructing this and that. That's what modernity does. Now you can have conversations with people all over the board, any age group, this kind of thing, because they're open to questioning. Whereas the traditionalist is loyal to the empire, and they say you do not question authority. When you get into post-modernity, which is our most advanced, most inclusive type thinking that we've now evolved to, which shows what Patrick said, this is the evolution of spiritual consciousness, because now we've moved into the postmodern values of inclusion, justice, equality. Look at all of the discrimination discussions globally we're having. Those discussions were not happening in previous worldviews. Now, that's where I feel like we can really, all of us that are pushing for this World Unity Week and these unified conversations, that's where I feel like we can do the most good, because we can create synergies there. And it's the synergies of small groups who really focus on that message that actually becomes the way that the next worldview takes place. It's in the small, highly motivated groups of people. And to me, that's this biblical principle of leaven. Leaven just works on that which is right next to it. And then it goes to the next thing right next to it. So the conversations I think we're having are examples of how we are all in the values of inclusion, so we can really synergize. Whereas if I'm talking to people that are in religion, I don't denigrate them. I've got a lot of people in my own family that are fundamentalists. They're wonderful people, but the things I think go beyond their boundaries. And once again, we get into that, where are the boundaries of your thinking and your paradigm? So to me, Ben, it really is looking for places where I can synergize with people like you, synergize with Patrick and others around. And there's more of us coming out every day. I mean, it's an exploding shift that we see taking place. And that always happens. The greater the chaos, the bigger the evolutionary leap that's about to take place. So we should take great encouragement from that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's no shortage of chaos in the world at the moment, Patrick, to give us hope. To give us hope that the leap will be big enough. But no, that's beautiful stuff, you know. And I think you know, some of the wisdom there, and it's the wisdom of experience, Doug, that you're speaking to, is that knowing where to put our energies, knowing where to focus, knowing where to apply our resources, and all those things, I think is really, really important if we're to be effective and not, you know, burn out, get disappointed, bang our head against the wall for too long. There is enough flowing water for us to work with the willing, as well as to have systems of education and onboarding, etc. So, Patrick, what's your kind of sense of is there a way we can accelerate evolution? How can we accelerate evolution, or are we just gonna, like, you know, basically approach it with more of a acceptance mindset?
Yeah, you know, you're talking to a Catholic, and we've been in the same place for 2,000 years, so I'm not sure about accelerating evolution. But I think, you know,
Vatican II was a good effort to accelerate.
It absolutely was. But and it's an interesting point you bring that up, because one of the things that Vatican II did was help us kind of re-understand our sacred stories, reinterpret our sacred stories to a certain extent. And we really have to, you know, there's an old, and Ben, you probably have heard this expression. It's an old Irish expression: "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." You know, we don't want to throw out our sacred stories, our spiritual stories. We don't want to throw the Gospels out. There's beautiful, rich stuff in those stories, but we have to kind of re-understand them a little bit from how they were written and what they're saying. And I'll give an example of that. We all know the story of the loaves and the fishes. You know, Jesus was coming to preach at the mountain, and 4,000 or 5,000, depending on how many, which gospel you read, men came, as well as women and children came. And, you know, the story goes, they collected the basket of 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and Jesus waved his magic wand, and boom, everybody got fed. Now think about this for a second. Reimagine that story, and reimagine it so that, first of all, you both know this. You have children. I have 4 children. We didn't go anywhere without packing a snack bag for the kids. We didn't go to church on Sunday. We didn't go to grandma's house that we did not pack snacks for the children, for the kids. So if there were 4,000 people that included women and children, I'm guaranteeing you that those women packed baskets with snacks for their children. They didn't just walk up and move out there. And then in the story, it says, Jesus told the disciples to break up the people in groups of 50. Nobody ever asked the question, why did he do that? Why did he say to break them up in groups of 50? So they broke them up into small groups. Now imagine the miracle wasn't that Jesus waved his magic wand and turned the 5 loaves and 2 fishes as enough to feed everybody. The miracle was that Jesus got everyone to share their food with each other. And in those small groups of 50, everybody got to eat, and there was enough food that there was plenty left over. Now, that's a story that tells us that God is working through us to help us create, not God creating for us. The story that the interpretation that we Christians have now is that Jesus did this for us. This proves how great Jesus is, not God working through us, all of us together as the oneness. So we have to reimagine our sacred stories. That's the first step to doing this, I think, is really rethinking that. And I know in the fundamental world, and we used to do this in the Catholic world too, we say, well, this is the Word of God. It's not the Word of God, it's man's interpretation of the Word of God. And there are a lot of different ways to interpret. There's about 68 different Bibles out there and tons of different interpretations. Let's rethink those stories a little bit. Let's the process of evolution is a spiritual one. Let's evolve on those spiritual stories and really look for what the meanings of them are. Like I just did in the story of the loaves and the fishes. It's not throwing out the spiritual stories. It's not saying these are wrong. You can't be a Christian anymore. It's just reimagining what being a Christian means. And what it means really is, being one with God and with all of creation. That's where we have to start, I think, is that. And I think we've started there. The work that you're doing, Ben, the work that Doug's done for years. I'm an activist, so I've looked at it from that perspective, standing, protesting and things like that, and trying to really change the way we see justice. Those kinds of things have to happen. But we have to also reimagine who we are as a people. And some of that gets into, and it's something Doug and I had talked about, the whole idea of our theology started out as dominance. It talks about that in Genesis. We have dominance over creation. We kind of evolved, and you can go back to the 60s when it was a man, Lynn White, who wrote an article about ecology. And he said, the biggest problem with our environment, what's destroying our environment, is our theology. And it's our theology of dominance over, and we have to move away from that. I'm paraphrasing what he said. He wrote a little longer than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. And we kind of evolved a little bit, and we took on a whole different mode of stewardship. We have stewardship. We have to be good care for creation. We have to be good stewards of creation. Stewardship is nothing more than a dominionist with a conscience. It's still the same idea. It's still a hierarchical structure. It's this idea. And if you look at things like racism and sexism, they all come from the stewardship model, because it's an idea that somebody's here at the top, and that whoever's at the top then has to be good stewards and care for everything and everyone below them. And in our culture, white males are at the top. In all cultures, males are at the top, but in our, American, European, Australian culture, it's white males. So that's what led to sexism, racism, that. We need to move away from that whole model of stewardship, and we need to move into a model of relationship, that interconnectedness of all of us. We are not here. I am not here to care for creation. I am here to be in relationship with creation. There's a story about St. Francis of Assisi, how he would go out and preach the gospel to the birds and to the trees. And somebody asked him one time, why are you doing that? And he said, because God told me to preach the gospel to my brothers and my sisters, and these are my brothers and sisters. He didn't mean that in some Dr. Doolittle talk to the animal way. He truly meant that these were his brothers and sisters. And, when he wrote the poem Brother Sun, Sister Moon, which, by the way, if you read his poetry and you read the poetry of the great Sufi poet Rumi, they're pretty identical. They're very similar. And so it really is to just reimagine who we are in relation to all of creation, that we are one with all of creation. If I look at you and I don't see God, then I'm missing completely. If I look at the trees and I don't see God, then I'm missing completely everything. So that's where we have to start to create this new earth. It's how we see each other and how we see God in each other and in all of creation. And then we'll evolve into a new earth.
Patrick, thank you for that passionate, beautiful truth that you've been speaking there. And that we have to start with how we see the world, with our identity, with our perception, with our theology, with the way we interpret and understand everything. And that's perfect, because a big part of Doug's work, going back to Doug, your dad, Max King, the legendary theologian, did a lot of pioneering work in this very space. And I know that there's some of the Paul's teaching to the Corinthians that you take at the very, very heart, and that's really what Patrick was just talking about. Tell us about, what does it mean to you for God to be all in all, and tell us about that passage and how it's driven your work.
Yeah, that's a great question with regard to this new earth, and that is we're trying to discover what its nature is, because the nature of the new earth is going to be what we consider to be the nature of its source. And again, I go back to this source, and the same source of the new earth is my source and Patrick's and your source. And so what is it that was ultimately being revealed about the nature of source? And in the passage you're talking about, Paul was writing about the last enemy that was facing humanity was the enemy death. And in the biblical narrative, death is another word for separation. He wasn't talking about biological death. When he said the last enemy is death, he was talking about that which separates the human from the source. And Jesus said the same thing, in essence, when he told the parable of the prodigal son. When the son and the father are restored, the father said, "This my son was dead, now he is alive." See, this is again, removal of separation is the defeat of death. And so when Paul ends that, he says, and he saw that being the conclusion of this new earth becoming present, as you pointed out beautifully, Ben, that ends separation between us humans, and therefore that is the defeat of death, and that paradigm is made present in this story. And that is at that point that God becomes all in all. That was Paul's phrase. He said, and then God is revealed as all in all, not all in some. And so when we are beginning to realize that, again, we're beginning to think in terms of universal principles. And when I think about, okay, how can we help evolution move on, and how can we spur this on? I will say that I have learned in the 18 to 30-year-old group, you have very little religion per se. You have a lot of them that are no longer maybe going to church or of any religion. But the one thing the narrative talks about, because Patrick is saying we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I use the narrative, but I don't use it in a way that they're suspecting, because Paul will talk about the fruits of the Spirit, which I would reinterpret as the values of the Spirit. So when I'm talking to people that are unchurched, I'm talking to people that are even atheists or in that 18 to 30-year-old about the new earth rising, I'm asking them, what are your values? Because you see, I have to decide what values belong to the new earth. How would I describe the values of the new? And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter who you are. You have values for yourself personally. You have values if you're married or you have a significant other. You have values if you're raising children. And oftentimes I'll say, well, what are the values that you want to pass on to your children? And it has nothing to do with whether they're in or out of religion, or where they are in life. But I bring that question from the biblical narrative, which I still use as the foundational principles that are really talking in depth about this new earth and its nature and how it works. And so, in that sense, I'm trying to build bridges that I don't have to get them to be part of a specific group or anything. I'm trying to pursue them from the universal nature of that source, the universal nature of the values of that source. And that breaks down the separation. And at that point, I'm having an all in all discussion in essence that is something that I would call the values of the spirit. So, that's very much a good point, Ben, about where we're doing with Unity Week. We're getting beyond the separation paradigms.
Ben, if it's okay if I could jump in on something that Doug just said, because Thomas Berry said we either flourish with a singular spirituality or we die in the desert. And he wasn't talking about a singular religion. He was talking about the spirituality, which is just what Doug was talking about, the value that, we can go forth with the value, the spirituality. And I remember many years ago, 10 years ago or something like that, I was in Washington, D.C., and it was this whole demonstration of a lot of the indigenous people. It was called the Cowboys and Indians, and it was all about the environment. So it was ranchers and indigenous people. And the indigenous people set up tents along in the mall. And I went into one of them one day, and there was a elder sitting there. He was a leader of one of the indigenous tribes. And I had my Franciscan towel cross on. I had it out. And he asked me what that was. And I explained to him. And he asked me, what does this mean? Who are the Franciscans? What do you believe in? And I spent a few minutes explaining what we believed in, what our spirituality was. And he said to me, that's the exact same spirituality that we believe in. And, we worship differently. We can worship differently. We can hold our hands differently. We can worship on Friday night or Saturday or Sunday. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is that spirituality of oneness and that we're all connected to each other. And that's, I think, what Doug was talking about as well. So.
Perfect. What a beautiful way to kind of begin to close this amazing conversation, Patrick and Doug, the spirituality of oneness. And, we're evolving towards something that is more whole, more inclusive, more beautiful, more generous, and more wonderful, perhaps than even we can imagine. So it's a wonderful journey, an unending journey of becoming. Doug, thank you so much for being with us. It's been great to reconnect with you. Thank you for, the incredible gift of connecting me all those years ago to Dr. Kurt Johnson. I don't think we'd probably be here today if you hadn't have done that. So that's an act of creation, which, and just that's so promising that we never ever really know what becomes of the seeds we sow. So Doug, just any final comments from you as to as we hold this new Earth Rising together, that we are the new Earth Rising. Any final reflections from yourself?
A final thought I have regarding the work that you've done, Ben, is that yes, everything starts with a paradigm shift in thinking. And so you do begin with a global conversation. But you've made the point all along that that's the beginning of the process, that the process has to move to global action for a new earth. And I would just like to say how much I appreciate the fact that you are really helping to contribute with the global action. And then by the same token, Patrick, you've been an activist your whole life, and you have contributed from that aspect of activism. And the thing I'm most encouraged about is how many people are moving from apathy in life, apathy about so many things, because it's not just the chaos, it's the apathy that exists in many pockets. And now people are moving from the apathy to action. And so I appreciate you, Ben, and I appreciate you, Patrick.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, Doug. Love it. And the energy of that is fantastic. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take our hands and hearts and minds and efforts and resources and plans and strategies. And it's exciting. And Patrick, you're certainly somebody who I've looked up to in the way you approach spirituality. Are you still identifying, with your bedrock in tradition, and yet you're reaching out tirelessly, to so many across the board, and you're an activist in the political domain as well. So you're operating on a lot of different levels. So final word for you, Patrick Carolan, today.
Again, I'd like to thank you, Ben, for everything that you're doing and getting me involved in this world unity and all of the other things. And also, Kurt Johnson's the person who introduced me to Doug also. So we should thank Kurt again. But that's sort of an interesting, you mentioned earlier, Ben, about how I introduced you to Brian McLaren. It's all about relationships. It's all about how we connect with each other, how we reach out to each other, how we talk to each other, and how we see God in each other and in all creation. And, if we're going to start, that's where we start. We have to start looking and saying, and if I walk down the street and I don't see God in everybody I see, then I need to go home and rethink of who I am and what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing. And that's how we can get people to start to change. It's just simple steps like that. But again, Ben, thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, beautiful, gentlemen. And this has been a really invigorating and uplifting and enlightening conversation as we dig a little deeper into how is this new earth rising? How can we utilize the resources of our spiritual traditions to enhance this new earth rising for more of our brothers and sisters to participate in this global creative process? Thank you for helping advance us down the road, and we look forward to more interactions all the way through the 99 days of peace through unity, all the way through to Peace Week. Maybe we'll come back together in September and have another chat. Yeah. It's been really rich and delightful. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.